Picture this. You're scrolling on your phone, daydreaming about a trip to Paris or maybe the Maldives. Suddenly, an ad pops up. But instead of pitching you a wildly expensive international flight, it shows you a visually stunning, incredibly similar location right in your own country for a fraction of the cost. Well, that's exactly what Deutsche Bahn, the German railway company, pulled off back in 2018. They deployed an algorithm that essentially analyzed users' browsing behaviors and paired their international dream destinations with visually comparable spots right inside Germany. And this wasn't just some clever little marketing gimmick. By combining algorithmic delivery with behavioral segmentation, they pumped out nearly 10,000 unique creatives, 10,000, all perfectly tailored to individual travel interests. It was so hyper-personalized and wildly effective that top tech executives absolutely took notice. In fact, Sheryl Sandberg, Facebook's chief operating officer at the time, literally called it the future of advertising. And this brilliantly illustrates the sheer horsepower of this approach. The end result of that campaign? A massive 24% increase in seasonal ticket sales. To put that into perspective, we're talking about moving over 2 million train tickets. It was a historic success. But more importantly for us, it's the absolute perfect gateway for this explainer, where we'll explore a fascinating, rapidly evolving field, the fusion of behavioral insight and big data. Okay, let's dive right into this. We are going to take a 5-step journey to uncover the hidden mechanics of modern decision-making. We'll look at 1. The data behind choices. 2. How we model decisions. 3. Real-world behavioral data. 4. The invisible forces of choice. And 5. The ethics of algorithmic nudging. Starting off with step 1, the data behind choices. We're looking at the shift from the lab to the real world. We are actually living through a massive shift right now in how human behavior is studied. Historically, we studied human decisions in these heavily controlled labs or through small, rigid surveys. But today, behavioral data science analyzes massive, real-world observational data. It's all about merging deep computational tools with established behavioral theory to extract patterns. And here's the real kicker. This science doesn't just passively observe you from afar. It actively engages with and shapes our decision environments as they happen. So how does this build on the old ways of doing things? Well, the old methodological foundations are being completely extended by data-rich affordances. In plain English, that means your digital footprints, the clickstreams on a website, the brief little pauses you make as you read a review, the GPS traces bouncing off your phone, they capture our embedded everyday lives. Researchers call this ecological validity. It's human behavior as it actually happens, out in the wild, completely stripped of that artificial lab feel. Which brings us to our second section, how we model decisions, and the 3 pillars of choice. Having mountains of data is pretty useless if we don't have frameworks to actually interpret it, right? So researchers rely on 3 distinct models. First, we have the contrast between normative and descriptive models. Think of normative models as like the robot version of us. They're idealized, perfectly rational with unlimited computing power. They tell us how we should act. Descriptive models, on the other hand, represent the grounded, messy reality of being a person. They describe actual humans, us, with cognitive limitations, bounded attention, and tons of uncertainty. They capture quirky phenomena like loss aversion and framing effects. And then we have the final pillar, prescriptive models. These take things a major step further. They actively use causal inference and predictive analytics to literally optimize your choices. Think of a health app running simulations on different notification timings just to nudge you into remembering your daily medication. They aren't just observing, they're practical tools designed to actively improve decision outcomes. Moving on to part 3, real-world behavioral data and its applications in some seriously high-stakes domains. What's genuinely fascinating is that these models don't just live in dusty academic papers. They are constantly bouncing across our daily lives. The sheer scale of this science is breathtaking. In healthcare, researchers are using natural language processing on social media to understand and even counter vaccine hesitancy. Over in finance, behavioral data from your mobile phone usage can actually generate credit scores, or apps can ping you to interrupt impulse spending. And in retail, it's everything from tracking your online clickstreams to using in-store smart shelves equipped with sensors just to see how you navigate a physical aisle. To really ground this theory, let's look at a super relatable, high-stakes medical example. Machine learning analysis of hospital electronic health records has revealed a fascinating and honestly kind of terrifying pattern. Step 1. At the start of a doctor's 12-hour shift, decision quality is sky high. Step 2. Mid-shift, cognitive strain really starts to build. And step 3, by the end of that shift, decision fatigue fundamentally alters their prescribing patterns. But by identifying this exact curve, hospitals can change workflow designs and add strategic breaks to literally save lives. Which leads us straight into part 4, the invisible forces of choice, the psychology behind the click. So now that we've seen where this happens, we really need to unpack the why. The core effort here is identifying the complex cognitive, emotional, and social processes at play. Because the reality is, our behavior does not happen in a vacuum. It's deeply embedded in complex social systems, and it is heavily influenced by the actual interface design we're tapping and swiping on. Let me give you 2 incredibly common consumer examples you've definitely experienced. First, price anchoring. Have you ever seen a massive, original price crossed out next to a sale price? Even if that original price is completely arbitrary and fake, it anchors your brain. It actually makes you more willing to pay the discounted rate. Or how about availability bias? Say you open Airbnb. You rely heavily on the very newest reviews right at the top, completely ignoring older, maybe much more comprehensive feedback simply because of how the app is laid out. All of this ties into a concept called bounded rationality and heuristics. Basically, when we're under time pressure or just plain overwhelmed by a flood of information, our brains get lazy. We fall back on simple rules of thumb, heuristics. So instead of actually comparing product specs on Amazon, we just buy the one with the most reviews, right? We become incredibly susceptible to digital herding effects and algorithmic curation. And that brings us to our final section, the ethics of algorithmic nudging. Let's look at the big picture here. We need to take a step back and zoom out for a second. As developers use these prescriptive models to relentlessly optimize for engagement and click-through rates, they inadvertently risk reinforcing some really unhealthy patterns. We're talking compulsive behaviors, polarization, prolonged screen time. It demands we ask a powerful philosophical question. Are we assisting choices or are we coercing them? Where exactly is the line drawn when users are completely unaware that their behavior, their environment, and their options are being actively modified in real time? The whole field is walking a massive ethical tightrope right now. First off, there's a serious lack of global inclusion. Lots of these datasets heavily focus on what researchers call weird societies. That stands for Western, educated, industrialized, rich, and democratic, meaning these models might not apply globally at all. Second, when nudges happen silently in the background, the lines of informed consent get very, very blurry. And third, just look at the emerging frontier of generative AI. We now have language models capable of simulating entire towns of synthetic human agents to test behavioral dynamics. If not governed carefully, models trained on unrepresentative data hold the massive potential to amplify bias and stereotyping, all under the guise of algorithmic neutrality. Think back to that opening Deutsche Bahn ad. It was magical, right? It matched a user's dream vacation with a perfectly tailored, cheaper alternative. But it also highlights a new reality we all live in. Behavioral data science is illuminating the deepest, most invisible mechanics of human judgment. So I'll leave you with this to ponder the next time you click buy or find yourself mindlessly scrolling. If an algorithm knows your cognitive biases, your fatigue levels, and your mental shortcuts better than you do, are your choices ever truly your own?